architecture, engineering, site civil work, so very familiar with the district, its facilities, and the current state of the buildings. And give them 1 second.
Something, yeah, we're having something.
Okay.
I'm going to hand out, I have hard copies of Joe's.
No, I would just continue through.
I think it's
We have enough.
frozen.
Like
We can
share.
make, yeah,
It's just frozen.
I like.
Thank you.
oh yeah, I have my own. So the ones that thank you.
I do.
There was one there, so.
Okay, folks, so we'll, as mentioned, I'm with H2M Architects and Engineers. The first slide you'll see is just for those who haven't had a chance to be introduced to our firm or what we offer. We're a multidisciplinary architecture and engineering firm, roughly over 500 employees throughout the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut region, as well as some satellite offices in Pittsburgh and Florida. We have a full of design and consulting services under our roof. So when we work on projects and able to service school districts, we packages from all of our architecture, structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, engineering, site civil work, etc. So when we work on these larger capital projects with the district, it's a single source for consulting under one roof. Let's talk about the 5-year plan and programming initiative that the district has engaged us on over the past year. So a brief introduction, we were retained by Hastings on Hudson to perform a two-pronged approach to looking at their facilities. The first is a building condition survey, and the second was a programming initiative that we engaged in with administration and the principals and directors. Start with the purpose of the building condition survey. So what we do is we basically give a visual observation and walkthrough of all the facilities. We look at your mechanical, which is your lighting, your HVAC, your current uses, and give a visual observation on the condition that those elements are in. We utilize a state form that, thanks Maureen. We utilize the state form from New York State that helps grade the conditions of those, and then at the end of those site walkthroughs, we compile our data and we do our best to give recommendations on potential infrastructure that either needs repair, replacement, upgrades, etc. The second prong of the RFP we responded to was programming. Now, when I say programming, we're talking about the use of the spaces currently, as well as any potential future programs or curriculum that administration was looking to achieve with the existing facilities that we have. So what we did there is we met with principals, department heads, including guidance, athletics, to gather how they're currently using the space and what their future needs would be. Then we took a comprehensive look at the layout, and when I say both facilities, I'm referring to this building, Farragut, and the elementary school, Hillside, to see the layouts that we currently have and how the rooms and spaces are being utilized, and any potential modifications or future changes that would need to be considered in order to accommodate the programmatic needs and wants of the administration. Questions there? So, back to the building condition survey. We had multiple architects and engineers walk both buildings as described. We utilized the standardized template forms that New York State Education Department provides for building condition surveys. From the results of that, we developed a comprehensive list of a 5-year plan in terms of recommendations of elements that we feel that the district should consider to either repair, replace, or upgrade. If you refer to the slides, what you'll see is just a example of how we lay out the proposed budgets for a 5-year plan. So again, it's a comprehensive list that we provide. And what we try to do is include a construction cost opinion as well as a soft cost, which would include your design consultants, legal fees, things of that nature that would go along with the actual construction cost, and then try to either spread those costs out over a 5-year fiscal period or select a range of where we see may be best suited for the district to consider replacing those elements. I.e., if a piece of mechanical equipment is already past its useful life, we want to consider those sooner. If it's something you want to consider in the next 5 years, we tend to put those out. So we try to give you a ballpark recommendation on what funds you may want to consider, in the next 5 fiscal years. Back to the programming initiative. As I said, we had multiple in-person workshops with the school principals and with your education directors. From there, we got a comprehensive list of current student enrollment, projected enrollment, current educational curriculum uses, as well as future programmatic elements that curriculum, I apologize, not program, that was looking to be brought in. A special focus was given to special education in terms of developing spaces for life skills classrooms and the opportunity to bring certain special education students that are currently being taken out of the district and be able to bring those services back to the district so those students could be serviced here. So those were some of the key things that we considered in the programming itself. What you'll see now is just diagrams of both buildings, and what I want to show you here is what we gave back in terms of a deliverable as for our programming efforts. So again, you have 2 existing facilities. They're being utilized pretty much at capacity now with the students you have. Up at Hillside, which is the first building you see here, with the addition that was completed last year, you actually have sufficient space to handle all of your classroom needs as well as special education. Some of the elements you see here in terms of programming were always deemed to be a part of a phase 2 once that addition was complete. So with the addition that we added, which added classroom capacity, added a cafeteria, it frees up other existing square footage within the facility to be reallocated for special education or resource rooms. So the layouts you see here went through a few iterations with the administrative staff. And this is, again, a recommendation to us, but would accommodate the curricular needs that the staff were looking to accomplish in the next 1 to 5 years. Most of what you see here would be minor interior alterations to the building, but the highlight that I think you should take away here is that Hillside, especially because you added an addition, has the capacity to deal with your current and projected enrollment, and you have the square footage to handle your programmatic needs into the future. On to Farragut, which is the building we're in now. So Farragut is our middle school, high school, as you're all very well aware. Farragut presents a little bit more of a challenge in terms of space. So we're pretty much tapped out in terms of classroom space and curricular space. So when we talk about wanting to develop spaces for special education or resource type rooms, there's really not that many options in terms of reconfiguring existing space within the building without having an adverse impact on another program. So at Farragut, we exercised a few different options, and I'll talk through them. We were spitballing ideas of, do we move all of the administrative spaces out of the building and construct a building elsewhere? Big cost, big expense. Do we look to add some square footage onto this campus, even though it's a little tight, but can we squeeze in some additional square footage that would at least be in part state aidable? Still an expense, but not as expensive of doing new construction somewhere else. And can we perform some interior alterations or reconfigure the space that would serve the special education and other curriculum that we're looking to bring in? So again, the diagrams or the conceptual plans you see here are color-coded by use or space and represent the iterations we went through with the administration to best accommodate the proposed curriculum. So that's a gist of, very high level of what we've done to date in terms of the 5-year planning and the building programming. So the next steps from here, and again, I get the chance to work closely with Maureen and Mr. Maturana. The next steps from here would be to consider what your priority projects are, and we can talk through some of them if you have questions on that, and then really to, consider funding sources and develop an action plan on how you would handle the priority projects that are identified. With that pretty much wraps up my testimony, but I'd be happy to talk. I'd be happy to talk through any questions that you may have, or to go back to any other information.
Doreen, I know you.
I have a question. Sorry, I
Sure.
have to run soon.
That's okay.
So I wasn't on the board when when the Hillside addition was designed.
Sure.
But, it seems like an easy way to free up this building is to move the 5th graders back to Hillside. And so I'm wondering if that's even possible. Like, in terms of how the building is constructed, if you could add another level above that all-purpose room, like that side, like, would it even be possible to make the 5th grade go back, and then you really
Right.
opened up at least the middle part of the middle school?
So I think, I'll answer the question in 2 parts. I think first, as the building stands now, it can handle the capacity for K through 4. Adding another grade, you may be tight in terms of classroom space, so as the building stands now, I don't believe.
No, I don't mean now. I mean, like,
Okay.
is it possible to build onto it?
Anything is possible. The real question becomes, is it economical? So when, prior to the addition being designed and added, and again, it actually predated my involvement with the district, but I was able to gather as much legacy information on the initial concepts between the folks here and the design architect that worked on that project as well. We explored options. Do we go up? Do we go out? Where would be the best location to add onto the building? And I think that after some engineering analysis, it was determined that the way the existing building is constructed, it would not be easy to add, let's say, a second floor to it. You'd have to substantially renovate the existing structures and foundations of the first floor. So going out beyond the footprint was the more economical option, and that's how the addition, that option came to light. So is it possible? The answer is yes. Is it economical? That becomes a bit of a struggle when you look to build above an existing facility.
Yeah, because it doesn't seem like, I'm just thinking, because it doesn't seem like we see what's here, in terms of creating this building and options for this, so.
Sure.
Obviously, an easy answer would be to move the 5th grade out, but if it's,
Sure.
but where we would house them on the site is currently not possible, and it sounds like in the future, it might not be possible either.
Not without modifications to the facility, right? Especially looking at.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not
projected
saying as
enrollment.
is today, I'm
Of
saying
course.
like we would have to build something, change something, move something out. I just want to know if it was possible to do. So you could add another floor at an expense, but it's not impossible to do it.
Not impossible, but expensive, yes.
Yeah, it was, we did explore that, just not to bring necessarily the 5th grade back at the time, but in terms of, as Joe had mentioned, it was one of the options when the addition was being proposed, and I think at that time they were saying it would have been like double, like, so whatever we spent at Hillside, it would have been at least double, because the existing building, when it was built, would need to be pretty much the first floor, like reconstructed, reframed. I mean, we would have then had to have trailers, because we were able to build because no one was, you can't have people below you when you're constructing, but you can have them to the side of you. So there would have been a multi-year need for trailers and all that. So, but Joe, I mean, during this programming effort this time around, I did mention to Joe that, obviously even prior to the need to do an addition at Hillside, which was really just to address the K-4 population and the fact we had become out of compliance with our special education programs, I had mentioned, I think that would be something to like look at as we think about this building, that if we move the fifth grade out. I think the amount of classrooms, we've had at times 7 sections of fifth grade.
Oh.
It would probably require an equivalent, because then you have the specialized spaces and other staff that would be needed there. You're talking about like a net of like 9 to 10 classrooms to move that group back there. I mean, it's that significant. And I think that's where, again, as Joe said, nothing is impossible, but as we know, anytime we're looking, even if we were looking to do that, it would probably, it would be wonderful, because this building is very tight. We've talked about the fact that the hallways here, and there's not a lot. During COVID, definitely I realized firsthand how tight this building is in terms of even the actual classrooms here for our middle school students in particular, and high school, I guess, are also, they're very, very tight. So, that was one of the options, but I think it would probably become so expensive that I think that's what's going to always be unless there's a development in town or something else that would increase. I mean, it would be a very expensive construction.
Yeah.
And we do
I
also.
just wanted to see if we
yeah.
could. I mean, in terms of SEL for fifth
Yeah.
graders, I think it's better to
No, I
be
agree, and that's
younger.
what we spoke about.
Playing on
It's just-
blacktops every
Yeah.
day when you're
No,
in
it's
fifth grade, I
different.
mean,
Yeah, no,
every
it's not
part of it is bad.
No, I
you know?
agree.
So-
Not to say that could be something, as we look at, this currently reflects things that the architects and some things that were picked up during programming, but this is a living document, and doesn't mean we ever do all of it, but I think that is something we could always get numbers to if that was something we wanted to consider in our long-term planning, whether it were to happen or not, I think it would be something, if we were going to consider doing an addition to this building, I agree, I think that would need to be at least revisited as a serious consideration, and to understand the cost to
Yeah,
do.
'cause it doesn't seem like we can do anything to this building, and building a building for the admin seems silly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the
So-
only reason that was even, because if you look at where
No, I understand.
our
You're
middle
looking at all the
classrooms are,
options.
would have been, there were options, we even talked about, like, if we moved downstairs and gave people, just in terms of classrooms, like, even the location of where people were, really just to free up share spaces for like middle school, high school.
So my,
Yeah.
as a follow-up to, I have one question I
Sure,
wanted to ask, but
of course.
just to, so in terms of relocating the central office,
Mm-hmm.
do you think it would be easier for them to be relocated to Hillside area versus the fifth graders moving there? I'm just asking, like, in terms of the construction that you were talking about, in terms of the expense, just asking.
No, it's a good question, but one thing
Is it
to,
much cheaper?
one thing to consider, when you're constructing non-educational spaces within a public facility, and Maureen can probably speak to this better than I can, but the issue is that it's not aidable in any capacity from the state education department, okay?
Right, correct.
So in a perfect world, from a design standpoint, it'd be very easy for me to take all the admin spaces, put them in a new building, even a simple building. However, the district bears that cost burden dollar for dollar with
Got it.
no aid back from the state. When you add or modify spaces that are for educational purposes, there's a sliding scale of percentage, but a good portion of that is aidable back from the state.
Got it.
So just in terms of construction economics, constructing educational spaces is much more economical and less of a cost burden on the district when compared to doing pure administrative spaces.
Got it.
Right.
It's an excellent question,
Got
but
it.
that's what tends to be the
caveat.
Achilles heel is the cost.
Got it.
But I mean, there are districts, to your point, that because similar to ours, we're kind of landlocked down here, so we know Ardsley built a full, I mean, again, we're not doing that. I don't want people to think we're building an administrative building for anyone who's listening. But again, when you go through these exercises, everything is, would we move this? I mean, everything, because you have to, because they were not doing it, but just to kind of understand, the pros and cons. But, we've talked about years ago with even Burke Estate, quite frankly. I mean, we do have property up there, and that property was purchased a million years ago with the idea that a new school building was going to be built on it. That was the rationale, and then, of course, things change, and we need fields and things such as that. But years ago, when I first, prior to, like a year or two prior to that administration was housed in what the house was on the Burke Estate. That's where they used
The
to
old house.
work out of. And then when that building was condemned, they moved people back. So I mean, I don't, listen, I like being I like seeing the kids, so we don't want to be away from the children.
Right.
But I think sometimes when people are trying to keep, they don't want to put a bunch, like satellite classrooms, so they'll move administration just
Yeah.
to keep kids together, even if it's more costly. So we did run through those scenarios because, and we've spoke about this, like if we built a gym, like Burke Estate, then we could repurpose some space here. So there's a lot of different scenarios, right, Joe?
Can I just clarify, just to make sure, this comes up in conversation, but moving kids is not part of the 5-year plan, just to be clear.
It is not, and the dollars are not represented in here, but I think, as Joe mentioned, I mean, we know this building is very tight. I think we're not currently speaking about that, but as we know, we put money in the budget this year to do some renovations for special education programming in this building, which is a 2-year phase project. And as we, take and move spaces around, there is a piece, as we look at our enrollment, we're going to have to consider either making modifications or reducing program. I mean, that, you can reduce program or you can increase class sizes as well. So those are the two other options that could be looked at as well.
Not really
I'm not saying we would, they're not, but I mean, those are not what we're thinking about, but I think, sometimes people say, well, the building and that, but as things change, I mean, years ago, we used to rent space to BOCES in the lower, where the current middle school is now the guidance, as well as the whole, a whole set of classrooms in the high school, not even 10 years ago, and I'm like, what did we do before that? So I think as things develop, and of course, our special education programming is just one piece of all the different things that have changed the space usage of this building, so.
So my second ask was that the new building that was constructed, was it done in a way that it can allow building on top? Because like you mentioned earlier, the way that Hillside was constructed, some foundational structural changes needed to be done in order to put another floor on top. So the new extension, was it done in such a way that it can hold a second floor if need be?
side.
Just asking.
You can.
So the new addition was not designed to accommodate additional load above, but there were,
there's room.
it was laid out, and there were conceptual talks that it's laid out in such a way that it could be added onto
Yes.
again. So the circulation, the egress components, there were concepts of actually making the addition larger at
Yes.
one point in time. So that is something that was explored and considered, and it's considered in the way the new addition is laid out. Be mindful as well that a bulk of the new addition is the taller space that accommodates the cafetorium, so the cafeteria and auditorium space. So typically in a situation like that, those larger spaces, you tend not to build above just because the spans are so large. But if that answers your question, no, it was not designed to carry additional load on top.
Got it,
But,
thanks.
but it was designed that we can do addition on the side. So it was, as he said, then the steps
Space,
and everything.
yeah.
So my understanding is that if we needed to, we could build another like 2 classrooms out, And the one thing is, although with the addition, we added 4 classrooms plus the cafetorium, but we netted 6 classrooms because of the reallocation of space. So it really was we got 6 classrooms plus, because of then
Yeah.
moving the library and all that. So, but I know that was also, but even at that time, the 5th grade that was just to house K4. So, we probably have 1 or 2 extra spaces, possibly year to year. And then we would still need, additional for that 5th grade.
My last question was, you said NICED form templates were utilized to rate the conditions of the various building elements.
Yes.
I'm just curious, what was the rating for Hastings?
In terms of like an average, so
An average,
we
correct.
we can certainly share like the formwork with you. They're pretty long, so it goes by, it doesn't give you like a net score or an average, but
Okay.
it's broken down by element, so even almost by room. So when you go into a room, it's floor finishes, ceiling finishes, fenestrations, windows, door, hardware, electronics. And it's a rating system. It's not numeric, but it's really visual. It's disrepair or needs repair, good, fair, excellent. It's along those
Yeah.
lines.
What was the general, I'm just curious, were we average, a little bit
No, I would say,
really
listen,
deplorable.
you have staff here that do a good job maintaining the facilities, and the district, over the last 10 years, has done a lot of pretty major infrastructure projects, roofing replacements, windows, boiler plants, lighting conversions to LED. I even think there's solar array in the works as well, so all in all, you guys are in pretty good shape. Space is the concern, not condition. I've seen much worse, if that,
Yes,
if that
yes,
answers
thank
your
you,
question,
that was
yes.
it, thank you.
No, the folks do a really good job maintaining the facilities here, for
Question
sure.
on the space, if you could go to the color coding. So the
Absolutely.
blue shading is what will be relocated? Is that probably that? And
So I know it's a little, it's small scale and probably hard to read on these, but we have both electronic and hard copies at full-size architectural scale that were provided back to administration. And the color coding legend that you see here, it represents either buildings that were going to be dedicated to, not buildings, spaces that would either existing to remain, existing to be renovated, administrative, special education, makerspace, resource rooms. So that color-coded legend, for example, that you see up in the point, it doesn't work on a projector screen, that you see in the upper right corner, it represents what the different color codings are. And again, probably too small to read at this scale, but we can certainly provide electronic PDF and additional hard copies if need be.
Yeah, and basically, what Joe just wanted to give you a snapshot today, that's not evening, it's daytime, of our plan and our documents, but this part of the work of the board facility committee, which is a subcommittee, I'm just saying that for the new members also, of the entire board, and this is things that we get much more into a level of detail with, like with the architects. They attend the meetings, we request them to attend, and our next steps really are to take this, it's actually a document, this is the full document that lists all the different finishes, and I can give the board members a copy of this, and you can kind of see the level of detail of either repairs or different things that were identified in this report, and don't let it scare you, because if you look at it, you'll say, how are we spending, $27 million? It really is a document we are required to do anyway, and we have to submit it to the state, and just like the state wants to ensure that, that districts aren't falling into disrepair, and there's, and also for our own financial planning, it's extremely important to have a good understanding of things we need to also incorporating into our fiscal plans for the upcoming years. But our next steps will be, and I'm hoping to know who will be on the facilities committee in the next week or so, because we do need to kind of get back together and now start to kind of look at our plans, or what, based on the recommendations from the architects, and this is really on the repair, maintenance, not so much space, things that we want to look at prioritizing, and what our thoughts are on how we'll get those accomplished. But they're, to Joe's point, thankfully, we've done a lot of really important work in the last few years, roofing and the boiler here and other large-scale items that were, 30-year-old items, but we do still have a few other things such as that will need to be addressed the next few years. So our next steps will be to reconvene and try to prioritize what was provided to us by the architects, and get, be in conversation with them as we think about addressing some of the items on this list.
Okay.
Okay. So just a follow-on question.
Go ahead.
The blues, does everything fit, is the question, right? So the blues have to be relocated. Do you have options for where they go and kind of the phasing?
Right, so these documents that were provided do provide some options, and even one of the options was even adding an addition or considering relocating space elsewhere. So to answer your question, we can accommodate, and we already have, we've had some discussions in the works, we can accommodate some of the phase one, as Maureen said, of some special education work, but to get everything that I would say would be on a wish list, you would be tight on space. You would, we would have to either, as Maureen said, either lose program or reconfigure space.
Or do some sort of addition, and
Right.
and I think as we get a much more tighter set of plans, and really a good understanding of what we're proposing, because again, this is looking at, we know our current students, if there's any additional students we think may attend the district or programming, and see when, what that, we would really be trying to get this into a much tighter plan to give the board an understanding, then I'm making this up, in the next 2 or 3 years, we do need to consider adding, I'm making up a number now, 5,000 square feet to this building. These are some of the ways we could accomplish it. These are the price opinions. So just as an example, there's a way to reconfigure the driveway into the back of this building near the Cochran Gym. You could bump out and create, we have a space that's used as a weight room or a workout room that then could be taken back and made into, it's a large space that's on a floor with classrooms. If we were to be able to accommodate that on the lower level by doing an addition, it may require a couple, there may be multiple kind of options laid out. And I think we would look at, in our immediate needs, how much square footage are we talking about, and what are the ways to do it, and what are the cost opinions? And to Doreen's, earlier point, if we were to consider relocating the 5th grade, which of course would give us all the space we probably would need in this building, what would that look like, and what would the cost of doing that? And I think that's, as Joe had mentioned, I think like everything else, it does come down to money is going to be a big consideration, so.
Okay. Thank you very much. Joe, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for presenting.
I'll leave one more thing just to build on what Maureen said, and I'll go back. So when you folks see these documents, and when you see, the full 5-year plan and, $20-30 million worth of costs, this is meant to be a tool to help guide you in decision-making. It's not a mandate. It's not saying, you absolutely have to do this. This is our best recommendation and meant to be a tool that you can utilize to aid in your discussion, and would be happy to be the backstop to help you through those. All right?
Yeah, and if I may, just from experience, the superintendent and other districts reiterate what just said, this is not the dollar figure. This is guidance, helpful beginnings.
Correct.
It's not the final number at all. So let me
Correct.
just stress that.
Ultimately, construction and markets will dictate a final price of construction or, equipment. So, but yes, this is meant to be a starting point, a foundation.
And you don't do this work wisely without having these sorts of figures and numbers in
full
early, so you
picture.
can begin working
Right.
well. So thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, but did you factor into this, the option that you mentioned about the relocation, in terms of, let's say, to Berks Park, like you get a trip, you didn't factor?
We did not. What you'll see in this 5-year plan focuses on propose either infrastructure upgrades or renovations within the facilities, as well as some things for athletics. So
Got it.
there's nothing in terms of new construction
As part of this.
that's spelled out in this. That would be
Got it.
handled under a separate initiative.
Got it.
And Joe, you did provide me, and again, we'll talk about this more in facilities committee, but you did provide to me when we were talking about programmatic renovations, just even a
Yes.
square foot number, so as we would consider, and again, different spaces have different costs associated with them, but as Joe said, the dollars are not included in here, but if we were to, he gave it to me as a way to kind of understand, these are like, if you were to do square foot renovations, what's the cost of new construction modification? So there's some numbers that they can get from looking at what current cost of construction is in neighboring schools, and give us some numbers. So as I threw out that number earlier, like 5,000 square foot addition, again, it's you never know exactly, but to give us a sense of what those type of additions would cost us, and give us some sense of that. So we do have that information, and then but again, it was not included in this, because we're not at that point to kind of make any recommendations.
Got it, thanks.
Thanks again.
Thank you so much, folks.
Thanks.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for waiting.
Moving on, we're going to move on to the second report, the second presentation of the day. This is the State of the District report, and it is an overview of quantitative indicators and outcomes that are related to academics, to SEL via panorama screening, and to behavioral reports and incidents. So Melissa, you're going to take that off? Or-
I'll-
Bill? Okay.
Yeah, I'll open and then Melissa will pick up, and we'll move through this quite quickly. For those who know presentations, the laugh line here is that my rising 10th grader saw this in development. I was solely editing, Melissa was working, and she said, "Too many words on a slide." Well, I said, reality is that this is a different kind of document than you're taught to present, because this has to stand alone. So here's the point. We're going to move through this really fast because it stands alone. You can come back and look at it. Let me also stress that certainly for the third part, the behavioral performance, this is the start of a conversation. This is a start of presenting information and data. We have done now 4 State of the District reports, at least mid-year last year, end of year last year, mid-year this year. These were intentionally qualitative. We have 2 principals in the room, Lou and Amy, joined by their colleagues. It was largely their voice, which I assembled and brought forward. Melissa and I decided that for this 4th one, the end of this year, let's make it quantitative. But you've, as a board and community, have had other quantitative reports. Parallel to those preceding State of the Districts, the qualitative ones, there have been data-based, evidence-based reports. Remember, data can be qualitative, believe it or not. So the quantitative reports have been coming to you since last year. We decided let's put this all in one place now, be more silent on the qualitative, focus on the quantitative, and bring you the academic data you've had before, what's publicly available now. There is some data not yet publicly available. Bring you the social emotional data as we have it, then also bring you, for the first time in a while, behavioral information. Again, let me stress, this is the start of this process. Indeed, we flag on September 12th, we'll be back with more information on behavioral. Let me say one thing, we're moving fast, so if you can just hold questions to the end, that might be most efficient and effective for all concerned. Last point, which is very, very important, the portrait of a Hastings learner will provide us the basis to then design what's the best way to report to the board, and whenever we report to the board, we're reporting to the community. Report to the community on, we hope, a blended way now to deal with quantitative and qualitative information. So we've had these 2 paths, qualitative, quantitative. We might say, how do we bring those together into single presentations at periodic times that work for us as administrators and teachers and all the rest, and it worked for you as a community. Alex already framed academic, social, emotional, behavioral, and with that, major caveat, we're a very mature community here, I hope. Even the smartest communities, though, get stuck on the number. There's some number that explains everything. Believe me, there is no single number in education that explains education. Just simply remember, we're humans, and if you have any relatives, there's no number that explains your relative. There's no single number. So bring that reality into education. Several moments, several indicators, several numbers might explain your relative, and they might explain us in education, but use that same judgment. And we put here a great quote from a Tufts University professor, very fresh. It comes out of the affirmative action situation we're now in, but I think it's a great statement on the limits of going pure number. So we may go full circle. Mature communities understand to look at numbers but not get stuck there. So my bet, Hastings, is we're a smart, mature community, so we'll look at the numbers, but look at those in the context of the qualitative and the other insights we have. So now, Melissa.
Okay, academic data, we will begin here. Just to reiterate, if you could save your questions to the end, and we'll go through academic, social, emotional, and behavioral. And just to frame the academic performance information that I'll be sharing, we'll begin with our local Renaissance Star assessments that are administered in grades K through 8. We'll talk about reading, we'll talk about mathematics, then I'll move into the New York State Regents, and these are hot off the presses for the middle school and high school. I did reach out to the state to make sure that they were able to be shared publicly. So again, unless something has dropped into level 1, I will not yet be sharing it because I want to make sure we follow the rules here in Hastings. So, first, our STAR academic screening data. We'll start with reading. And just to provide a bit of context, once again, STAR was introduced as a diagnostic screener in fall 2021. It's administered to all students in grades K-8 3 times a year, and kindergarten students do participate in STAR, but they have a different screener. It's early literacy concepts because they are still learning to decode text on a page. So they are given the early literacy screener, which actually includes early numeracy. So their mathematics is included in early literacy screener. Later in the presentation, when we get to math, you'll see there is nothing there for kindergarten, and that's because it's subsumed here. Okay? So I'm going to talk through the talking points, which will be in writing on the next several slides, but
for you, for ease of viewing, I'll maintain this slide on the screen. I want to point out a couple of things. So let's see if this pointer's working. Okay, so if you look horizontally, you're seeing the differentials between spring 2022 and this spring. Okay, so we're talking about different cohorts of students. If you look diagonally from left to right, moving up, you're looking at the same cohort of students. Okay, so I did want to point that out just as you're viewing. I think that provides a bit of information. So the large majority of our students, K through 8, performed at or above the benchmark on the STAR Reading Diagnostic Screener. And we've seen some substantive increases in performance for some cohorts of students moving from one grade to the next. So we see that for grades K1, and again, that's the group moving diagonally, and also 6th to 7th grade. We are also seeing slight increases for some cohorts of students moving from one grade to the next, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 5 to 6, and you're seeing some increases within the same grade. So again, if you look across, you can look at our kindergarten, 82%, 91%. First grade, we see that 5th grade, 6th, 7th, and 8th. I want to note that we have relatively small numbers comparably in our grade levels. So some of that variation is simply because we don't have a large number of students. We can see some differences. And same thing with any decreases that you're seeing. So we did see a substantive decrease for one cohort of students moving from 4th to 5th grade. If you look on the diagonal, and you're seeing slight decreases for 3rd to 4th and 7th to 8th. So again, taking into account any new students who have moved in and our small class sizes, that can account for some of that differential. Moving into mathematics. Okay, same information, introduced fall 2021 and administered 3 times a year to students in K-8. And again, there is no standalone mathematics screening in kindergarten. So here we go for math. The large majority of students once again performed at or above the benchmark on the STAR Mathematics Diagnostic Screener, and that's grades 1 through 8. We are seeing a substantive increase from grades 5 to 6 for that one cohort of students. A slight increase noted for one cohort moving from 2nd to 3rd. And then you're looking at students on the same grade, different groups of students on the same grade. You're seeing increases for grade 1, for grade 5, for grade 8. We are seeing a substantive decrease in performance from 1st to 2nd, and slight decreases noted 3rd to 4th, 4th to 5th, and 6th to 7th. Math support is going to be added in for kindergarten for next year. That will be new at Hillside. We also have a new mathematics resource coming in, so that's very exciting. And in the middle school, as you know, we have the math interventionist. So we are looking at that. Actually, Scott Wynn, the new middle school principal, and I were just talking about math intervention for next year and the MTSS process and how we could help students along. Regents performance. So again, these are the data that have been released for public consumption. Our Regents performance data slides are here, they follow. Geometry performance data is omitted, and I did that on purposely because it was a small sample size. I'm very cognizant of personally identifiable information, so if anyone were to know the student who took the geometry test, you would also know how the student scored, so that has been omitted, and that was purposeful. Algebra 1 data will reflect middle school and high school performance, and all of the other Regents data that you're looking at is high school performance data. June 2023 was the first administration of the new U.S. History and Government Regents examination, and we're actually quite excited about that. So if you look at that score up there, that is really strong. That is the first administration. Okay. So, some overarching takeaways. We have done very well across all content areas, and that has been our trend over time for Hastings. We've seen improvements since last year on all administered Regents exams. Highly commendable performance once again on the U.S. History and Government Regents, given that it's new. So I'm going to show you some more specifics. It does stand alone. I just want to explain what you're looking at a bit more. So if you look, this graph here is actually this table, just in visual form. People like to consume information differently, so we included both. And this is the number of students that are tested. So you'll see that for each of the Regents exams. 65% is considered passing on the Regents exam. And you'll see here the performance level and the breakdown. FMS is number of students who scored within this range at the middle school, and then what percent of the students who took the assessment for that school. Those are listed beside, and similarly for the high school. And again, this is the only slide where you'll see information for middle school and high school. Okay, so we're seeing a very, very high proficiency rate, and I did give that in the overview slide as well. So I'll move through these fairly quickly. You can see a similar story for our ELA, very strong performance. Similar story for global history, very, very strong. Living environment. And once again, our U.S. history and government. Okay. Moving into social emotional data. Panorama has been administered 3 times annually since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, so this began in 2020. This fall, you may recall we did not give the survey to middle and high school students, and that was done because we gave the Portrait of a Hastings Learner survey. We wanted to gather that information. We did find that there was a bit of overlap in the types of questions that were being asked, and we wanted to avoid survey fatigue and keep students in their classes on class learning time. We did administer in the winter. We did administer in the spring, and in the spring there was a much lower participation rate, specifically in middle and high school. It shows in the slide deck as grades 3 through 12, because that's how Panorama organizes their data. But we did have a lower participation rate, and there were some technical challenges on the side of the vendor with rostering, so it took us a little while to get moving, and the seniors had gone at that time, and so we had a little bit of attrition. So I do want to just give that caveat, really interpret this cautiously, because we had, for middle and high school, about half of our 53% take it. And here we go. So I'm going to begin with survey data from Hillside Elementary School. And the first thing I'd like to point out is up here. And so it's banded by grades K through 2 at first, and that's because the teachers take the survey on behalf of the students. So they report out for the younger students because of their reading readiness, and being able to self-report is harder in a survey format. And then for Hillside 2, grades 3 and 4 are listed here. And it's a different, you're seeing different indicators here, and again, that's because the students are taking it directly. So I'll pause here and I'll give the highlights while you can view the data. And some of the overarching takeaways, we did look at 4 areas for students in grades K2: emotion regulation, social awareness, social perspective taking, and self-efficacy. The spring results range from 69% to 83% favorable, with social perspective taking the main area for growth, and emotion regulation as the main area of strength. And again, teachers took the surveys on behalf of the students. Regarding overarching takeaways for 3rd and 4th grade, we looked at 6 areas related to student competency and well-being, and we looked at self-management, positive feelings, self-efficacy, and self-efficacy is really around the belief that I can do it. It's the belief that I can achieve. Challenging feelings, emotion regulation, and supportive relationships. Results show that the majority of students in these grades are reporting favorably in all areas. Most favorably, supportive relationships, 91%. They were feeling that those relationships were very strong. Positive feelings and supportive relationships have been stable since the fall. All other areas reflect an increase in favorable responses since the fall, with emotion regulation a notable increase since the fall. I'm sorry, I'll go back again here. Looking at the areas related to student supports and environment, which include teacher-student relationships, school climate, sense of belonging, and engagement, which are also along that bottom band there for 3rd and 4th grade. Results show that the majority of students, again, overall, are reporting favorably in all areas. The results from fall to spring are fairly consistent, with the exception of a slight decrease in school climate. And again, to point out, we do have a small sample size, so thinking about new students moving into the district, things can be swayed in that way. It's something to be curious about. All right, and those points are indicated here. And again, as Bill mentioned, they're standalone. Okay, we'll look at grade 5, which again in the panorama screener is banded as an elementary K-5 report. So I was able to disaggregate 5th grade and pull it out as a separate grade because I could select middle school. And I was able to pull that out. And I think that's relevant because they are in a different building, and I know Doreen had been mentioning that a little bit earlier, so it's good to look at them within the context of the middle school environment. So I did pull them out of the elementary for that reason. And the areas are the same. So we looked at 6 areas related to student competency and well-being, and I won't repeat them, they're there, you can see them in the headings. The results show, again, overall favorable reports in all areas. Most favorable spring results were reported for supportive relationships, not dissimilar to what we saw in grades 3 and 4. And all areas have been relatively stable since the winter. Related to student supports and environment, we had those 4 areas: teacher-student relationships, school climate, sense of belonging, and engagement. Results show that the majority of students are reporting favorably in all areas. And again, we're seeing consistent results from winter to spring. We're seeing stability. In grades 6 through 8, results are showing, again, favorably in all areas. Most favorable, again, supportive relationships, so this is good news. All have been relatively stable since winter, with the exception of an increase in positive feelings.
Oh.
And then finally, 6 through 8, related to student supports and environment, favorable results. We do see substantive decreases in all 4 areas from winter to spring, and we'll be examining this decline a little bit more closely as we enter the next school year. Okay, Hastings High School. Again, the survey indicators are the same. I won't be redundant. You can see them across the top there. We're seeing overall favorable reports, and most favorably in supportive relationships. So we see a little theme here going on, which is really nice. And we see stability since the winter in all areas. Now related to student supports and environment, and again, those are the 4 on the left-hand side: teacher-student relationships, sense of belonging, school climate, engagement. Majority overall are reporting favorably in the area of teacher-student relationships and school climate, but not in the areas of engagement and sense of belonging. And there are increases noted since winter in all areas, and a substantive increase is noted here in engagement. Let me just take a quick look at that. Okay. Again, I just want to caution that the spring was about half the students taking the screener for middle and high school.
The fall was largely like...
Portrait of a
90s.
Hastings learner.
No, I'm saying the previous one. Like, what was the... 53% was that one. What was the, sort of the baseline of the earlier...
I can pull it up as we're looking. I can actually see it. It was... actually, I did try to pull it up. It no longer held the metric in Panorama, but we did have a much higher response rate. And I remember looking at it. I cannot give you an exact number because it's no longer in the system.
No,
I had the same question. I said, let me go back in and check it out. Behavioral
Let me do
data,
the first slide on this, and then you pick up.
sure, okay.
So again, previously in this district, there has been a look at behavioral information, as I've been advised, but at least not since I've been here. And I think we're now on a path of, as it's titled here, a call for comprehensive reporting. And we really need to do that, because the first bullet says, and I believe firmly, because I'm in this building, I'm in Hillside a lot, we're a safe and healthy and secure district. And as I talk to my colleagues elsewhere, and my background is all types of schooling, so I know from my own experience, this is a safe, healthy place. That's a fact. And I've begun roundtables, as many of you know. I'm not calling them focus groups because I've got a research background. That's a particular thing. But these roundtables have been very, very helpful to me. I'm going to keep them going a lot this next year. And those roundtables have said, yes, Dr. McCarthy, this is a safe, healthy district. At the same time, we have experienced behaviors, particularly in the middle school. I'm not saying an increase, but we have experienced behaviors that are run against the norm of what we have to have here and have largely established here as a place that's caring and watching out with dignity and respect for all students. So that's another truth. The roundtables also confirm that. They said we've got these two conflicting truths. Part of what we need to do then is have better data and information that we're looking at to understand, to help all of us figure out how are we doing and how can we do better. So that's now this call for comprehensive reporting, and this is the first step on that. And we'll come back to, at the end of this section, where we're headed. But now, Melissa, why don't you pick it up?
And just to add a little bit more detail to that idea of comprehensive reporting, we have two paramount objectives, and that is to increase transparency and clarity, and that's around both behaviors and also about consequences, and that includes restorative consequences and disciplinary consequences. And we need to be sure that we're protecting student and family privacy in the same way that I did by not presenting certain Regents data. You know, we can't do anything that is going to be identifiable, because that is just, not only is it not right, it's also not legal. We cannot put that information forth publicly. So today's presentation, I'm going to give an overview on DASA and VADER violations, and I'll give a little bit of background on what those are. So we'll put a little bit more flesh on that. And in the future, we'll get more into code of conduct violations by theme, like what themes are emerging and the types of violations we're seeing, and any kind of related demographic information we see. So when we disaggregate, when we're thinking about gender, when we're thinking about race or ethnicity, we're thinking about free and reduced lunch status, IEP status, right? So to be able to follow up in our next reporting on that. So back in November 2021, I made a presentation to the Board of Education about the Dignity for All Students Act, also known as DASA. I did link that presentation in this slide deck, so if anyone wants to go back and take a look at that. But the broad strokes are here, and it's the idea that no student shall be subjected to harassment or bullying by employees or students on school property or at a school function, nor shall any student be subjected to discrimination based on a person's actual or perceived race, color, weight, national origin, ethnic group, religion, religious practice, disability, sexual orientation, gender, or sex by school employees or students on school property or at a school function. And then with the Crown Act in 2019, that was signed into law, which also prohibits racial discrimination based on hair texture and hairstyles, and that protects the students' right to wear their hair however they desire without threat of discrimination or loss of access to school. So, I have had the opportunity over time to have many conversations with individuals and with groups around DASA. And I found that one of the things that's really important to clarify is that not every insult and not every report of bullying is covered by DASA, okay? Every single report that happens has to be investigated, but it may not rise to the level of a material incident under DASA. So for example, if a student makes a comment that gets into some of these protected classes here, it does not necessarily rise to the level of a DASA material incident. It could very well be a code of conduct violation, which is where we see most things happening. So a student makes a very big mistake or does something wrong, right? It could be deliberate, it could be mistaken, but unless it rises to the level of a substantive disruption to the educational environment or imbalance of power over time, typically bullying is sustained in multiple incidents, though not always. But I think that is probably one of the main misconceptions that I see. And the real issue is making sure that if something is not going right for children, that it gets reported, it gets investigated, and that there are consequences that happen. And those consequences can be restorative and disciplinary. So we're teaching into it, and we're holding students accountable. And 9 times out of 10 for school districts, that's not a DASA violation. It is typically a code of conduct violation, though we do investigate it to make sure it's not a DASA violation. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, so now, with that said, we have a broader umbrella, which the state calls VADER. And VADER is violent and disruptive incidents. And I made sure I put the categories here. So we report every year on VADER to the state. And the state gives us a grid. They have a specific format that they use. And there are required categories for reporting. They're quite serious. So I listed them all here, but I wanted to point out the green highlight. There's your DASA that sits within the VADER. Okay? So the DASA, the intimidation, harassment, menacing, or bullying, I flagged it just as DASA there. That gets reported under this VADER, violent and disruptive incident reporting, that goes to the state. So, the Hastings Public Schools had 10 founded VADER incidents in 22-23. 7 of them are within the category of intimidation, harassment, menacing, or bullying. They're also counted as DASA violations, and I'll show you that in a really condensed format on the next slide. The other 3 founded VADER incidents were related to a threatening comment that was made, bringing an object to school that's not permitted on school property, and the third was vandalism. Okay. So I do want to point out, I did put 2 categories, founded VADER incidents, and the column here in the middle also includes the column on the right, because as you recall, DASA sits within VADER. So I just wanted to flag that distinction there too. Okay. All right, so when we're looking at a district of over 1,600 students, our total number of founded DASA or VADER incidents is small. 5 of the 7 material incidents under DASA have occurred at the middle school, and the number of founded VADER incidents are comparable for the middle and high school. Code of conduct violations, as Bill referenced, we'll get more into detail in September on that in terms of themes, and I did mention the demographic analysis. DASA and VADER incidents are all violations of the code of conduct. So we have a code of conduct. We say this is our framework for behavior, so to speak. Anything that is a violation under DASA or under VADER is also a code of conduct violation. Okay? There have been many more violations of the code of conduct in all 3 buildings over the year that have not risen to the level of material incidents under DASA. The largest have occurred at the middle school, and that's not surprising. Given our recent conversations here at this table, we've seen 87 incidents over the course of the 22-23 school year. We'll provide thematic analysis again on September 12th. So some next steps. So one of the things that we want to be doing is constantly getting better, and that includes our record-keeping systems. The state does not mandate a specific record-keeping system for a district or for a school building. The state makes sure that you are maintaining records. You can have your own systems for doing that, and they have a very specific way you have to report your incidents because they push a form, and that's done in the state reporting portal. But they don't require a specific way for reporting, and over time in Hastings, buildings have had autonomy in the way in which they've done that. So moving forward, we're going to be augmenting our record-keeping system by shifting to eSchool data. That's our student repository system. That will be the sole repository for logging incidents at the building level. And the reason we're making this shift is we believe that it will enhance our accuracy in being able to disaggregate data and report out. It will enhance longitudinal data, so as students are moving between buildings, right, it'll give us an idea of the scope of a student and their journey over time. I spoke to the disaggregation, and also within eSchool, it automates reporting to the state. So certain things are already in there in the Vader category that people put in, that it's a direct pull. So when it's time to do that state reporting, the systems will sync. And we want to be able to do that a little bit more readily by shifting to eSchool as the repository system. I mentioned that previous record-keeping systems have allowed for individualized and different data collection approaches, with Google being the most frequent way of doing that, Google Folders. There has been a little bit of manual analysis, so how many founded DASAs, and looking at the actual forms and making sure we're going through what's in the folders or what's in people's logs. So this will streamline everything. We think it's a better way of moving through. And then one of the things I would like to point out is we had a wonderful action plan development team come together at the end of June to begin working on the behavioral charter action step for Portrait of a Hastings Learner. That's one of the action steps that was outlined. And those differentiated behavioral charters for each building based on very specific core principles are going to be developed as part of our portrait process. And we do have an action plan that the team developed for that. So that will help in our refinement process. And then providing enhanced clarity around disciplinary consequences. So while the Code of Conduct does currently have parameters for things like that, I know there's been some interest in enhanced clarity around the consequences. So we can look there as well.
And I'll be really quick on this, but again, to honor who I'm listening to, those last two bullets jump out. And in plain English, all this is about being there for our students in better ways.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what this is about, very simply. And it's how do we be clear on what are the behavioral expectations. We've got a code of conduct, it's 70, 80 pages, we have all this other stuff. How do we bring that down to be very accessible, very clear, so we can be better for our students? Tie that into the portrait process. The portrait process itself has bubbled up this as a concern, so we should all be very pleased to know that. And then lastly is how do we have greater clarity? That if X happens, what's an outcome? Now it's gray, it's never an A to B, but at least how do we give more clarity in a simple way? So that there's a lot within those last two bullets, but it's what people are calling for. And I would hope a year from now when we sit, we'll say we've made progress. I'm not going to say we're going to be there, but at least we've made progress. And simply, are we there for our students in better ways?
So I want to open it up for questions and discussion.
Just preface one thing. I think our administrators have a hard stop at 3. So we're going to have another bite of this apple next meeting on September 12th. But if we have like headline questions, just so we can get through the rest of the meeting.
And things would help us as we head to the 12th,
Got
in
it.
terms of the presentation.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
So I was typing to that. So anyway, I will start backwards because you're on DASA right now, and I'll ask the other one later. Okay, so if I understand the way that it's mapped out, there is a broader umbrella code of conduct. Within the code of conduct, the subset of the code of conduct, we have the VADIR, right?
So, yes, and so code of conduct is really the framework of the expectations.
Correct.
Right? So if you have different types of incidents. So someone may violate that code of conduct.
Correct.
And then that's problematic, and there needs to be accountability for that piece and education for that piece, right? So the code of conduct is really like, here's the path, right? And then Vader is like, when we're thinking about violent and disruptive incidents, what are they? Like, what's the level of the incident? And Vader is quite serious.
Correct.
within Vader is DASA. However, also, within the code of conduct violation category, you can see lots of behaviors that could conceivably later become DASA violations if they were sustained over time, if they were with one student, if they were, right? So it's related.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me give you the frame I have in my head, which I think that's what it is, but I want to confirm it.
Sure.
And then after that, I'll ask specific questions. So I see the code of conduct that we are trying to capture everything as possible, like the bigger umbrella.
Yes.
Within it, we have the Vader, and then we can have non-Vader too. Right?
Yes.
Because that one is specific with that kind of focus aspect of it, which needs to be reported. That's why it has that acronym. But under it, DASA is under Vader.
DASA is under Vader because when you're thinking of violent and disruptive incidents, that's one of the state categories.
Correct. So DASA falls under it. But under, so again, I'm looking at it. This is the big umbrella code of conduct. Under it, you have the Vader and then non-Vader. And then under Vader, you have DASA.
Correct.
And under DASA, you have material incidents that, DASA is defined by material incidents, even though you would have all those rubrics, so to speak. It has to be material incident for it to be DASA,
Correct.
right?
It can still be founded under the code of
I know,
conduct, but not material under
correct.
DASA.
That's why I'm making the code of conduct the big umbrella.
Yes, you got it.
And then under Vader, you have DASA, which has all these stipulations, and I would just say we have, under Vader, we have DASA and non-DASA. Let me just say that.
Yes.
And the stipulation for DASA is material incidents. And then the non-DASA may still be incidents that are DASA in terms of naming, but it's not founded in that materialistic
Correct.
category. That being said, the clarity here is that, which I know the code of conduct is going to map out at some point based on the last two bullet points that Dr. Makesi rehashed, is the nuances between the materialistic
That's right.
and the non-materialistic
Yes.
part. And I believe that, like I shared the Yonkers stuff, if we map that out, I think that to be very clear to community members as well, who are part of the authorizing body of the work that we do here, to understand that this rose to this because of 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, that being said, can you, if possible, but you don't have to, give a specific example that would, you think, as an analogy, or as just simply as an example of an incident that is exactly the same incident by name, but then this has this additional piece to it, so that's what will make it material incident, and this part is one-time incident. I know you've mentioned one-time incident versus sustained. Those are, of course, but outside of the sustained incidents, is there any other stipulation that would make an exact same incident materialistic versus one non-material?
Yes,
Sustained.
to complicate matters further, you can, I've spent a lot of time on this, with counsel, with courses, okay, and we all still learn as we go, right?
Yes, correct.
So I will also assume that. But yes, to make matters more confusing, you can have a single incident that rises to the level of a DASA.
That's true, that's
And if
correct.
there's a substantive disruption to the educational environment, and
correct.
it hits the protected classes that are in that paragraph that I put up, or the Crown Act, that can also be a DASA incident.
materialistic.
Whereas,
Material incident, sorry.
you know, an incident where there's use of words that would violate, you know, in terms of the protected classes that you saw up there, yet it's not sustained, you're not seeing a power imbalance, somebody said something or they mimicked something that they heard, and when it's investigated, it may not rise to the level of material incident. So it may trigger the DASA investigation. What may come out of it is a founded incident, but not a material incident under DASA. And so what I want to try to help people wrap their heads around, this is a very thoughtful, empathetic, savvy community. And the nuance with this one, which is really a tough one, is that it's all problematic. It all needs to be addressed to help children.
Correct.
DASA has a different set of things to do from a regulatory and reporting standpoint.
Got it.
And there's a level of significance. So I just want to be careful as we're having these conversations that the words do matter, because I think sometimes we're speaking different languages around certain things. And again, with DASA, there's quite a level of seriousness, and that is not to say other things are not serious, but there's a significance that's more regulatory. There are obligations that we have in terms of processes we have to follow for investigating and reporting. I hope that answers the
It does.
question.
I mean, I thank you, because I just wanted to bring it out more. And you actually hit the nail on the head on the next thing I wanted to say, that as we can all see, and again, I'm saying this because I know community members have conversations surrounding all of these things, that all of these VADIR and DASA is the reporting aspect.
Yes,
That is state mandated.
right, and an investigative
An
aspect.
investigatory aspect as well. But as a community of humans,
Yes.
that we need to support each student regardless of who they are, the code of conduct is the to-go place.
Yes,
Because that's a bigger umbrella.
yes.
And that's why a lot of my communication has been about the code of conduct. Because once we get the code of conduct right, which is what you were saying, that it's a working process, getting it all of the different parts, Dr. McKessie pointing to those last two, then everything else will fall in place. But I know that sometimes when we have conversations, it's DASA, but DASA will not be sufficient in itself alone for us to do the work that everyone in this district deserves. And so I just wanted to echo that.
Right.
So then the thing that I wrote first, I'm doing it backwards, was that I want to I didn't finish typing my thoughts, so let me say this appropriately. I want to recognize, and this is truly from my heart, that I know Hastings is a good place. Like, some of us will not be here if we didn't think so. We have options to live elsewhere. But, so I would not want some of us, our passion to do better, that we focus on, to mean that we are trashing Hastings. Does that make sense? Like, it's not, the doing better part is what some of us are trying to focus on, especially when your ears are being, you hear, like when you hear a baby crying, as much as everything else is going well and you keep hearing the distress, that is what sometimes becomes the drive and passion, and not because we are saying everything else is not great. And so I want to recognize that, yes, this is a district that is doing well. I've already mentioned how even with whatever got blown out, somebody approached me about it, and a couple of different individuals that were thinking of moving here, whatever, in wherever they found me. And I said, oh, you think this is not happening in the world? At least Hastings, we are real. And they're like, yeah, you're right. And that was it for them, because all of these things are happening in the world, in neighboring schools. They hush it, but we don't hush it. The community is very, like, the administrators, everybody is like, we all are going to do better. This is not about shaming, this is not about punishing, this is about we calling things out so that we all do better. And so that's what this district is. This district is one of the community connected. Like, it's like a family. We're all in each other's faces, and after that, we sit in each other's backyards and eat chips and crackers for all we care, and then move on to the next thing. And so I really appreciate every work that is being done here for the sake of our kids, and it's a very intentional effort that is going into it. I also want to, the second thing I would, okay, yes, sir. The second thing that I would say is that I recognize navigating this work is very difficult. And at some point, when we revisit this, there is something that I would type out so that I can say it well in a succinct manner. But in other groups that laser focus on different things, you can decide not to pry into people's philosophical stuff, right? You can decide not to. This is if let's say you are gender centered, I don't care whether you're anti-racist or not, but you are supporting gender, and that's sufficient, right? Or this and that and that. But with the school system, you cannot not just do that. You have to create the space for everyone to thrive. And so I want to, this is a way to just say to the administrators and teachers that I know this is a difficult thing. We may get it wrong, we may get it right, but let's work together in a way that we know that when we are wrong, we are willing to just keep working the best way we know how. And respecting the interest of all, because like, I don't want this to become something that we use occasion to fight each other, because then it never brings progress. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Alex, I just had one question on screens for the e-assessment stuff. You
Okay.
had mentioned substantive versus slight decrease. Do you know what the mark is? Is it 5%?
I did, and that's me. I just said it like 5%.
Oh, okay, it's not defined per
No, that
se,
was
but-
me, I defined it.
Okay.
I think it was either 3 to 5%, I can look at it quickly. Let me
Okay,
take a
or you
look.
can get back to me on it. That's it.
Okay, Teresa, you okay?
Yeah, it was within a few percentage points. I was like, that's a slight decrease
So
if it was
5
like
is like
5 or
where it's
more.
concerning?
Yeah, for me, I just noted a little bit of a difference, whether increase or decrease. Once it was over 5%, I said,
Okay.
that's kind of
Like a
substantive.
statistical significance.
Yeah, I
think.
mean, it was more of my way of just describing it. I don't even know if I can call it statistically significant, but I thought, if it's below 5%, you're seeing a little wiggle room. If it's above 5%, you're like, oh, something changed here, right?
Thank you.
Some form of
Do you have any
confidence.
questions? Are you good?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. So again, we're short on time, but we're going to revisit this topic in even further depth in the September 12th meeting. So just a quick thank you. It's a huge lift, obviously. And not only that, a huge thank you to the district. There's a lot of districts that don't record this data, that don't make it public, even if they do. So we really, it's a huge effort in transparency, and I think it's for the benefit of all of us. So thank you.
I want to thank Adriana Boudreau, our data coordinator, who helped me pull a lot of this. And then,
I
of
was going to
course,
ask you who's on your team
Yeah, we
for
have
this.
we have a tight team. Thank you to the administrators and teachers, and also the students. I mean, this is all them, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Moving on to personnel, we're going to look at this as a consent agenda. Are there any questions or comments about our appointments, our amendments, or our retirements? No? Is there a motion to approve our appointments, amendments, and retirements?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank
This
you.
time I saw your head shaking.
We're very few here, so. Minutes, are there any questions or comments about our minutes from the June 20th meeting? No? Is there a motion to approve our minutes from the June 20th meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you. New business items, we're going to just quickly run through the headline here, just to make sure we're set up for Tuesdays, and we're set up to we're moving to an earlier time, 6 PM.
Tuesday,
So-
6 p.m.? Let me see.
Yeah, there's a list of dates here, linked in here. That's most of it. It's a couple Wednesdays we hit, just to,
And a key indicator is if we need an executive session, that would be at 6, and we then would just post and start the regular meeting later. So just trying to get to the earlier end.
Yeah,
So-
so it's new business, so
So
just an
often, if you've
advisement.
had an executive session, that would have been at 6.
On
So-
Tuesdays, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So we're not going to start at 5 with executive sessions, but it's what the
Okay.
document that Melissa D. put together says.
So our meetings are going to be, are going to start at 6, and if there's executive session, we'll still start at 6?
Always at
Yes.
6,
Okay.
yeah.
Yep.
Okay, got it, got
Clean
it.
thing. So if you want, it's just an advisement, but if you want to download the doc later and just
Yeah,
put it in your
you just-
calendar.
But you need to
Okay.
vote on it, so.
Oh, it is voting, yeah?
Yes.
so-
Yeah.
To
Okay.
agree to the
Is there,
dates.
is there a motion to approve our meeting dates for the coming year?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
You look at me twice, I can't say so moved.
Second public comment, there is no public, so we're going to move on to agenda review. This will be for including the summer.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa D., for putting down for next year this agenda plan, or some have known me to call it the course plan for you as a board. It's largely updated, but I think immediately, I'm not going to belabor the point, but then it lets you look ahead as a board to say, where might I want to add an agenda item or not? Where is a meeting particularly heavy, like today? But this was like a double meeting. Why did I say like? This was a double meeting. But one thing that we will already fold in here, you'll see that with the state of the district, we've already taken a shot at a mid-year blended quantitative, qualitative, and end-of-year blended qualitative, quantitative. And we very much would hope to have this end of the year as that final June meeting, not bump it into July if we can help it. But you can look at this later, and in our next meeting, we will talk in more detail about where we need to modify, et cetera.
Okay. Moving on to Board of Education comments. Any comments or?
Welcome, Teresa.
Thank you.
Welcome,
And-
Jody.
It's been a very interesting day.
Yeah, right? Both feet in
And
the deep
Jody,
end.
who is not here at this time.
Sure.
but, yeah.
All right. Is there a motion to adjourn our meeting?
So moved.
Second? That?
And
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
I appreciate the board's patience with our extended 1:30